funky.
Hey guys, what is up? It's your boy Don John, and we're here to talk about financial management. So for me, I will be talking about chapter 9, part 7, I think. So, valuing the entire corporation. So now that we are done with discounted dividend model, as discussed by the previous reporter, we move on to corporate valuation model. So what is corporate valuation model? So a corporate valuation model is an alternative stock valuation approach to a discounted dividend model. So when your dividends are not so reliable and relatively new and not yet mature, or no history of dividends at all, we need to use corporate valuation model in order to get to know the value of your corporation. So unlike the discounted dividend model, the corporate valuation model focuses on the firm's future free cash flows. So now let's proceed and look at the screen. So by looking at the equation below, we can see that instead of looking for a forecast of dividends, the corporate valuation model focuses on the firm's future free cash flows. So this was already discussed in chapter 3. I'm just gonna move on. So EBIT is earnings before interest and tax. So let's take an example. So the case of Home Depot, the first term in brackets in the preceding equation represents the amount of cash that Home Depot is generating from its existing stores. So the second term represents the amount of cash the company plans to spend this period to construct new stores. To open a new store, Home Depot must spend cash to purchase the land and construct the building. These are the capital expenditures, and they lead to a corresponding increase in the firm's fixed assets, as shown on the balance sheet. But Home Depot also needs to increase its working capital, especially inventory. Putting everything together, Home Depot generates positive free cash flow for its investors if and only if the money from its existing stores exceed the money required to build and equip its new stores. So we can see the corporate valuation model formula on the screen. So we see that FCF is the free cash flow in year T, and the discount rate, the WACC, is the weighted average cost of all the firm's capital. When thinking about the WACC, note these 2 points. So number 1, the firm finances with debt, preferred stock, and common equity. The WACC is the weighted average of these 3 types of capital, and we discuss it in detail in chapter 10. Number 2, free cash flow is the cash generated before any payments are made to any investors, so it must be used to compensate common stockholders, preferred stockholders, and bondholders. Moreover, each type of investor has a required rate of return and the weighted average of those returns in the WACC, which is used to discount the free cash flows. Free cash flows are generally forecasted for 5 to 10 years, after which it is assumed that the final explicitly forecasted FCF will grow at some long-run constant rate. Once the company reaches its horizon date, when cash flow begins to grow at a constant rate, we can use the following formula to calculate the marketing value of the company as of the date. As we can see the formula of the horizon value, we see the value of the company at a certain point in time. So V company at T equals N, so N being the year, what year it is. So we have the FCF, N plus 1 divided by the difference of the WACC and the G of FCF. So the corporate model is applied internally by the firm's financial staff and by outside security analysts. Analysts use both the discounted dividend model and the corporate valuation model when valuing mature dividend-paying firms, and they generally use the corporation model when valuing divisions and firms that do not pay dividends. In principle, we should find the same intrinsic value using either model, but differences are often observed. When a conflict exists, the assumptions embedded in the corporate model can be re-examined, and once the analyst is convinced they are reasonable, the result of that model are used. In practice, intrinsic value estimates based on the two models normally deviate from one another and from actual stock prices, leading different analysts to reach different conclusions about the attractiveness of a given stock. The better the analyst, the more often his or her valuations turn out to be correct. But no one can make perfect predictions because too many things can change randomly and unpredictably in the future. Given all this, does it matter whether you use the corporate model or discounted dividend model to value stocks? We would argue that it does. If we had to value, for example, 100 mature companies whose dividends were expected to grow steadily in the future, we would probably use the discounted dividend model. Here we would estimate only the growth rate in dividends, not the entire set of pro forma financial statements. Hence, it would be more feasible to use the dividend model. However, if we were studying just one company or a few companies, especially companies still in the high growth stage of their life cycles, we would want to project future financial statements before estimating future dividends. Because we would already have projected future financial statements, we would go ahead and apply the corporate model. Intel, which pays a dividend of $0.56 versus earnings of about $1.17, is an example of a company where either model could be used. But we think the corporate model is better. Now suppose we're trying to estimate the value of a company such as eBay that, to date, 2008, has never paid a dividend or a new firm that is about to go public. In either situation, you would be better off using the corporate valuation model. Actually, even if a company is paying steady dividends, much can be learned from the corporate model. So analysts today use it for all types of valuations. The process of projecting future financial statements can reveal a great deal about a company's operations and financing needs. Also, such an analyst can provide insights into actions that might be taken to increase the company's value. And for this reason, it is integral to the planning and forecasting process as we discuss in a later chapter. Preferred stock is a hybrid. It is similar to a bond in some respects and to common stocks in others. This hybrid nature becomes apparent when we try to classify preferred stock in relation to bonds and common stock. Like bonds, preferred stock has a par value and a fixed dividend that must be paid before dividends can be paid on the common stock. However, the directors can omit or pass the preferred dividend without throwing the company into bankruptcy. So although preferred stock calls for a fixed payment like bonds, skipping the payment will not lead to bankruptcy. As noted earlier, a preferred stock entitles its owner to regular fixed dividend payments. If the payment lasts forever, the issue is a perpetuity whose value, VP, is found as follows. So the formula is VP is equal to DP over RP. VP is the value of the preferred stock, DP is the preferred dividend, and RP is the required rate of return on the preferred. Allied Food has no preferred outstanding, but discussions about such an issue suggested that its preferred should pay a dividend of $10 per year. If its requirement return was 10.3%, the preferred value would be $97.09, found as follows. In equilibrium, the expected return RP must be equal to the required return RP. Thus, if we know the preferred current price and dividend, we can solve for the expected rate of return as follows. Some preferreds have a stated maturity, often 50 years. Assume that our illustrative preferred mature in 50 years, paid a $10 annual dividend, and had a required return of 8%. We could then find its price as follows. Enter N equals 50, I over YR is equal to 8, PMT equals to 10, and FV equals to 100. Then press PV to find the price. VP equals $124.47. If RP rose to 10%, change I over YR to 10, in which case VP equals PV equals $100. If you know the price of a share of a preferred stock, you can solve for I over YR to find the expected rate of return, RP. To summarize, corporate decisions should be analyzed in terms of how alternative courses of actions are likely to affect a firm's value. However, it is necessary to know how stock prices are established before attempting to measure how a given decision will affect a specific firm's value. This chapter discussed the rights and privileges of common stockholders, showed how stock values are determined, and explained how investors estimate stocks' intrinsic values and expected rates of return. Two types of stock value models were discussed, the discounted dividend model and the corporate valuation model. The discounted dividend model is useful for mature, stable companies. It is easier to use, but the corporate valuation model is more flexible and better for use with companies that do not pay dividends or whose dividends would be especially hard to predict. We also discussed preferred stock, which is a hybrid security that has some characteristics of a common stock and some of a bond. Preferreds are valued using models similar to those for perpetual and regular bonds. So that's it for now, guys. I hope you learned something, and I would like to thank my sponsors for making this video possible, and I would like to thank all of my supporters because without you, I wouldn't be here today. So I hope that I helped you as a student in order to learn what you needed to learn in this topic, and I hope that we get good grades.